Good afternoon, and welcome to the Campaign online briefing, Power Up 5G in Gaming. I'm Austin Allison. I'm the editor of Campaign Middle East, and it's good to see so many of you tuned in. As I was just saying, I've got some faces. I'm glad that wasn't me. I've got some familiar faces and some new ones. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's going to be a really interesting session, and I'm sure we're all going to get a lot out of it. This is Campaign's second webinar, and we've got a few more coming in Q4, so do keep watching our website, campaignme.com. Subscribe to our newsletter there and follow us on our social channels. We're also setting up our multi-speaker Marcoms 360 Predictions 2021 event, so do get in touch if you're interested in coming on board as a partner. Obviously, the predictions that we had last year were pretty much wrong to a T, but I don't think anybody's predictions were right then. So this webinar that we're on couldn't happen without our official partner, GfK. GfK is a global leader in data and analytics, providing consumer and market insight for more than 85 years. Serves more than 10,000 clients globally and offers the most comprehensive and independent retail panel, tracking point of sales data with more than 180 million products in the tech and durable industry. Through actionable recommendations with analytics and technology, GfK turns knowledge into an engine for sustainable growth for companies, so they become shapers of tomorrow in their business and industry. That's the sort of official spiel, but you're going to hear an awful lot more from GfK, an awful lot more GfK insights in the webinar, so they'll speak for themselves. As well as being on Zoom, as I mentioned, we're also streaming live on our Facebook page, so if you or any of, if you're having trouble getting in, you can't hear me, but if any of your friends are having trouble getting in, tell them to find Campaign Middle East on Facebook and they can watch the session from there. Also, if you want to revisit the session afterwards, it will be on our Facebook page to rewatch. There's a chat feature on Zoom to talk to each other, to pass rude notes, to do whatever you need to do there. But if you do want to submit a question for the end, please use the Q&A panel. As I say, we've got an amazing panel who I'm just about to introduce, and they're all happy to take your queries, so make the most of that. So today we're going to look at where consumers and brands are headed with superfast 5G devices and new gaming consoles hitting the market, and the effects of coronavirus on top of that. Fast 5G technology is taking over the mobile landscape, and at the same time as fast mobile connections have grown, the lockdown has seen an uptick in consumers buying gaming devices, including consoles, computers, and phones. So it's likely that the technological advancements like the rollout of 5G will also fuel the growth of gaming experiences on mobile devices. But to discuss all these trends and their implications, today I'm joined by Dr. Christoph Kreuss, who is the Vice President of Global Marketing and Consumer Intelligence at GfK. And Christoph is joining us from Germany. I'm joined by Joe Zogby, who is Head of Commercial Strategy, Gaming and Esport Agency, Webedia Arabia Group. Joe's in Dubai, like me. He also runs his own esports team, so he's right plugged into the gaming community. And joining us from the US is Ibrahim Khadiri, who's Head of Market Insights for EMEA Emerging Markets at Google. We've got a team of international all-stars, and I'm going to try and make the most of your time. So I'm going to start off by asking Christoph, if you could share any sort of statistics and just some of the numbers that will ground us in consumption of gaming and 5G devices in the market at the moment. What can you tell us about that?
Sure, more than happy to, and thanks for having me on this call.
Well, thanks for being here.
So I think first and foremost, what we see in this COVID times is that people, I guess less surprisingly so, spend far more time at home on gaming. And while we have seen massive declines in sales, basically people holding back because of a certain amount of insecurity overall in the consumer space, so a strong decline in TV, fridges, and even in smartphones, we have seen quite an uptake in gaming PCs and peripherals. So especially during lockdown, of particular interest, and this is actually a trend that we have seen globally. So this is United Emirates and also the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia are pretty much in line with the global trend here. And what is interesting to see, also in terms of when we later then talk around marketing and consumer segments, is that especially the entry level in PC gaming notebooks has experienced quite an increase, and that's the segment above $850 below the $850 segment, where we particularly see that the gaming notebook PC has gained some really strong traction. So we can really speak of a tectonic shift in the market in consumer spend on home devices, and in particular on gaming at home. Just I don't want to kind of bombard you with too many numbers, but I think kind of two kind of KPIs that kind of stick out was we saw in UAE, we saw a 50% growth in gaming mobile PCs in the first half year, and 180% growth in gaming monitors and 73% in gaming accessories. So this kind of stands out and is kind of representative also for the growth in the market. The MENA.
Sorry, is that similar around the world? Is that sort of on par with?
It's pretty much on par with what we see at global scale. I think what kind of stands out is really the growth momentum that we see in the MENA region, speaking in kind of in relative terms. So there seems to be a specific dynamic also in the market, in particular in the region. The MENA region overall hosts the fastest, second fastest growing gaming community. And this is something where we basically pull together our retail panel data from more than 130,000 retailers from GfK, together with the global gamer report and consumer pulse report that we launched at the beginning of the COVID phase, where we have seen that actually 46% of respondents dedicated far more leisure time in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to gaming than during the pre-COVID phase. So that's kind of, again, another proof point that we see based from our POS and retail data, from the largest retail POS consumer panel data that we run, plus equally important, really the changing consumer behavior and the sentiment, the usage and attitude patterns that we see on the consumer side in the market, in particular in the MENA region.
And what about 5G? What sort of insights have we got into 5G consumption of 5G devices?
I mean,
yeah.
In particular
Sorry, I was going to say the Middle East has always sort of really led the charge when it comes to mobile phone technology. Is that still the case?
I would say in terms of network coverage, absolutely so. We see again in the UAE a network coverage, kind of again more kind of from a technical operator perspective speaking here, of more than 80%. The penetration of 5G devices in terms of volume is relatively high. So we see in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Emirates, this kind of hovers around in terms of volume 3 to 6%. In terms of value, including the prices of units sold, that's around 10 to 15% already. So that's slightly higher than, let's say, in Germany. But who is really leading the pack, and that's something we haven't seen before with the 4G, is China. So this is around, just to give you some reference, I think that might be of interest with the Xiaomi's, Oppo, Vivo's, when we look at their Jan to August revenues, we see up to 60-70% of revenue share already sits with these new 5G devices. So they are really leading the pack here and are at the forefront.
Now, Joe, I'm going to move to you. You're my sort of on-the-ground gaming expert. Are gamers in the, well, first of all, actually, I'd like you to tell me what, because I'm just going to throw out the term gamers, but I think it'd be really handy. I think you're probably the best person to define that term. So if you could tell me what we're talking about when we're talking about gamers, if that's possible, and then can you tell me what they're expecting from 5G? So let's tie these two things together.
I mean, on the gamer, sorry, Joe.
It's okay. First, thank you for having me, and I think it's quite an interesting question because we had a lot. What are gamers? I think everybody who played a game at some point in their life, or kind of casually spend a little bit of time to kind of do that, are considered to be as gamers, disregarding of age or where they come from, etc. So that's the kind of very simple, broad kind of definition of what are gamers. The perception when it comes to when people want to play games, obviously there are maybe 5 things that they are looking for. So one is obviously to kill time. Second one is to kind of escape the reality. I would say also to be competitive and to kind of go into an immersive experience or to have a social kind of connection. When it comes to the perception of 5G, I think we need to look at it from 2 things. The people who are looking for competitive and immersive experience, they understand that there's going to be a technological shift that is going to happen in that kind of space. They have yet to understand what it is. However, for the casual gaming community, they have yet to understand it. And I think marketeers who are pushing the 5G discussion need to do a little bit more of an education of what can that improve from their end.
Interesting. What's your, I mean, is that the same that you're seeing, Ibrahim? You know, who stands to benefit from 5G, and how well is that being conveyed to those people?
Yeah, I think first off, I appreciate the opportunity, and great to be amongst the panelists of speakers. I believe the point that Joe brought up is super pertinent, particularly when it comes to defining kind of what a gamer is and who gamers are. I think we're at a point now with mobile devices, particularly in the Middle East being so high, and in the Gulf countries, that nearly everyone is a gamer. And if we look at how that connects to connectivity, and particularly 5G, I think there is still a gap in terms of understanding of what 5G will enable. And there's still an opportunity even on the B2B side for businesses, like with any new technology that does come up, it's going to open opportunities. So to foretell what all of the benefits of 5G are going to be, I think it's a little bit early in the process. But a couple of key things probably come to mind. 5G, like 4G and all the other bands that came before it, it's rather a revolution, or it's an evolution rather than some type of revolution in terms of the connectivity. So we're talking about increased speeds and lower latency and better connectivity. So with that comes a slew of opportunities for businesses that would benefit consumers. So if we think about the broader 5G and connectivity space, we're talking about things like smart cities, and how can different facilities within a city speak to one another. Things like autonomous vehicles, and when you have a network of autonomous cars on the road, how do they interact with one another and process the data that these sensors are seeing in near real time. So I think we're still at the early stages of what 5G can enable, if we think about it from a pure technological advancement, and even what the future generations of connectivity will be enabling. But I think when it comes to gaming in particular, we're still seeing that many gamers, particularly when we're talking about this multiplayer online really connected gaming, are still happening at home. And I think the better connectivity will slowly start bringing that out of the home, so people can start gaming, even though it's online and in a connected manner. They'll start doing that out of home. And I think that's what one of the near-term advantages that we'll see stronger connectivity bringing to the arena.
Joe, can you see yourself doing that? Can you see yourself playing, I mean, from a competitive point of view, you know, we all play casual games on our phones. Can you see yourself playing sort of competitive gaming from a coffee shop or from somewhere outside the home?
It already exists. It's
okay.
been there for happening so much time. Mobile gaming has been dramatically increasing, and it reached a point where esports right now, which is the kind of competitive aspect and the professional aspect of gaming, is being played on mobile gaming, on mobile devices for quite a long time. We're seeing in Asia, actually, it even surpasses PC gaming in some cases. We're seeing games like PUBG Mobile right now putting around $5 million of prize pool money, and it's being played on a mobile device. Nothing is being connected to that. So absolutely, it will become
$5 million to win on just playing on mobile.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's definitely not only just playing on mobile, because it is about the mentality and the athlete in you when it comes to that competitive aspect, be it a mobile or be it a PC or be it a console. The amount of dedication that is being put by a gamer is completely a different topic. But on that point, absolutely. Already mobile gaming esports is massive. It will continue to grow. And I think we see right now the publishers, the gaming publishers across the whole world are trying to go as a cross-platform and to create mobile games, because they understand that this is the new audience and they will like to play on the go and competitively as well.
It seems that, I mean, I've got the sort of dated cliched, and I'm parodying a bit here, but the dated cliched but idea of gamers as being young men and sitting in their parents' basements in the dark. I suspect that you might disagree with me just a little on that. So how wrong was I before COVID, and how much more wrong am I now?
I think the stereotype of a gamer in a basement and sitting in the dark is quite. I think it's a little bit of what Hollywood kind of portrayed gamers in the 90s, I would say. So right now are a little bit different. They're a little bit cooler, I would say. They were a little bit kind of more edgy, more techy, and I think that's the kind of that's the kind of image that is being portrayed right now, is that they are the new kids on the block. It changed because COVID-19. Kind of was the tipping point of what gaming is considered as a kind of social exercise. COVID-19 was the pin to showcase to all the kind of maybe the population that gaming right now is an entertainment mix that similar to how you watch Netflix, similar to how you kind of go online and shop or listen to music or stream. This is part of your entertainment mix that you need to get your daily dose on. And when that happens, when COVID happened, obviously it kind of escalated that and accelerated that process. So I wouldn't say that it's a kind of, a loner that is sitting in a basement. I would say right now that, you're tuning into your streamed music, you're going to watch a little bit some series, and later on you're going to play some games. So it's a natural mix of your daily life.
Now, it's interesting that you say you're sort of talking about consuming gaming, because one of the things that I was wondering about is how much is gaming a sort of a media to be consumed, and how much is it social? Because there is a big social aspect to multiplayer, whether it's multiplayer games or even just sort of passing messages to your friends on the chat function on sort of mobile games. Is gaming seems to be almost a sort of social channel.
I think the fact that you are actually engaging with other people, you are sharing information, you are having a discussion about a certain topic, that creates it as a social conversation. And when you are doing it in a kind of virtual environment where you are able to have a dialogue versus a monologue, that automatically puts it in the context of a social. So definitely it is. And also the gaming publishers do consider themselves also as well as a social platform, not just as games. That's what, for example, Epic and Tencent and Riot and all these guys say, that we're more of a social kind of entertainment mix versus just a game.
So
that's a trend that we also see in our kind of consumer pulse report and the gamer reports, exactly this kind of key trend. We know that every 4 person globally, and this is not a big difference in MENA versus other regions, is playing games on his or her mobile phone, and increasingly, by the way, women. And I would totally agree to the point that Joe just made. It's the entire gaming topic is almost like a blend between sports and a huge social media network, but with all its implication it has on marketing, understanding consumer segments, path to purchase. The entire marketing setup has to be redefined around this dynamic that we see, in particular from esports. And so I couldn't agree more to this point, and this goes across the board actually. So all games have significantly participated, or you received or experienced an accelerated momentum from this lockdown. And I guess we all know the stats also from different gaming platforms. You came to hear also more on Stadia, I guess, but also from Twitch. I mean, that we basically found our retail post-download consumer pulse data really reflected also in the consumer behavior, with an uptake of 50% since March on these streaming platforms. So that's
was it sort of across demographics, or was it sort of skewed towards
well,
again, was it skewed towards youth and men, or how much are sort of older people playing or women playing?
That's I think where we really I mean, basically the overarching trend pretty much goes across segments. Increasingly, there's an increase in female and in women engagement, also on games that we see. By the way, also in the to refers back to the point on our gamer report, where we saw that an increasingly number of female users are actually also kind of stepping into the gaming notebook space for the first time. So that's kind of reflected in there. On the Twitch side, I would say you really need to differentiate between segments and channels. It's at least the way it looks from a really kind of analytic and inside consumer perspective. Twitch is still kind of quite young versus, I mean, gaming is relevant to almost everybody.
Yeah, Ibrahim, you're what are you seeing? What sort of trends are you seeing, and what's your take on this?
So I'll take a step back really quick to the point that you raised around the definition of a gamer, and I think it's a super pertinent point, and I wanted to dwell on it just for a minute, if I may. I think the role of marketeers is constantly evolving, and we've seen the fragmentation of media accelerate this and make their jobs so much more difficult. Mm-hmm. I think particularly when it comes to gaming and gamers, we no longer, and we established this earlier, that basically anyone who's playing games, whether it's on mobile, whether it's on console, whether it's on any other type of device, is a gamer by some type of definition. And there's professional and casual. I think within that context, as marketeers, we have to look more at consumers across the journey of all the different boxes they check, rather than in verticals. So if we think of gamers alone as standalone, I think that dilutes the value of them as consumers across the spectrum. And I think gaming more broadly, and it's a really important definition, and we're seeing this evolution. I think COVID just accelerated it, but this was around even pre-COVID, where we saw new launches of games sometimes shadowing or overshadowing Hollywood launches and affecting movie box office revenues. So I think the COVID situation just accelerated the digital shift. And within the gaming industry, we're seeing this evolution right now, where it's no longer about, let's say, devices or consoles, but it's around the content or the game that the consumer wants across any screen that they're looking at, whether it's a gaming laptop, whether it's across a console or a mobile device. And I think as marketeers, and as we think of gamers, we need to think about it as screen agnostic or even device agnostic. And it's a similar evolution that we saw in the video space is now happening in the gaming space with this technological revolution and this the COVID situation, which greatly accelerated it.
Now, I'm going to go to Joe actually here, because I mean, that's a very good point, that probably even talking about gamers is us off on the wrong tangent. So as Christoph said, such a large percentage of people play games that it's almost like talking about TV watchers as being you know, a segment of people that you're looking at. But Joe, how well do I mean, you run an agency, Webedia, that looks at you know, that helps marketers reach sort of through gaming and through the gaming community. How well do marketers understand gamers and understand the channels that gaming opens to them? Do you think that they're on the ball, or do you think they're missing an opportunity, or what's your experience?
I think, I mean, in the industry, we kind of segregate market, let's say, brands within two kind of segments. So some of them we call them endemic, and some of them we call them non-endemic, and the rest is non-endemic. Endemic are actually brands who are very much related to the core business of the gaming, let's say, community. So you're talking about the likes of, you know, devices and, you know, the likes of hardware and software that are really kind of related to the gaming community. So obviously these guys are quite familiar with their audiences, because this is their prime prospect. And the non-endemic business is the likes of the FMCGs, or the, you know, the beverages and all the other, or the car industry, you know, banking. So these are the kind of other brands that are probably not quite there when it comes to the understanding of what the business is all about. There's a little bit of a, I would say, kind of, you know, a question mark about what do we need to do right now. And they are definitely eager, but definitely the level of understanding is not quite prime to any other type of business, simply because it's a language that, probably as marketeers, they don't understand and they haven't quite experienced yet. So if you're facing a marketeer that is young, probably in the age, and have probably put a little bit of time on some late nights on PlayStation or Xbox, you would say that, okay, you know what, the conversation probably would be easier. Sometimes it's quite a little bit difficult. Now, are they understanding the parameters of the importance of that topic? Absolutely. Any successful marketeer right now are looking at that kind of segment, and they understand that it is part of the entertainment mix. And I keep stressing on that point. When it is part of the entertainment mix, definitely it's a moment where a brand needs to tap into. Now, the question is how. But I would say probably in the last 2 years, we have seen a probably amazing growth of interest from brands into the topic. And also from a budget standpoint, we are seeing brands dramatically increasing.
Or locally, or both?
I think globally, the topic has been quite accelerating to a certain extent since 2015, 16. I think it kind of kicked off really big then. In the region, I would say in the last 2 years, we have seen quite a dramatic increase. And that obviously puts it into the context of right now 5G coming and how telcos are using 5G to communicate throughout gaming as the core of that conversation. So certainly, I think within the next year or two, the Middle East and MENA region, I would say, would take a strong leap in that direction.
Now, I'll go to, first of all, Christoph, and then to Ibrahim, just sort of to see how Joe's sort of experience locally, and obviously you're putting that into a bit of a global context, but could you put that into a sort of wider global context? Do you, so that we can possibly, if we're, as Joe said, that it's only that we've been maybe a couple of years behind other markets, so it'd be a chance to see what we can expect here, and possibly, and also where marketers should be looking for, perhaps, for inspiration. Christoph, what have you seen in other markets in terms of where marketers have been looking to?
Yeah, as we said before, so the UAE, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, is always kind of very dynamic, also mobile markets. Obviously, they're quite well advanced. So they again comes back to the previous point. The kind of 5G momentum is really very strong, and that's what we see in China. That's extremely strong. I mean, it's a market where basically 12, 14 months we have seen an average selling price around $1,200 US, and this has basically dropped by 400. So it's really reached mass. It also comes back a little bit to our broader discussion on 5G before we then refer back to the gaming aspect. I think the 5G overall is a little bit of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah? So we see a strong momentum on the network side, particularly on the MENA side. I mean, that's quite tremendous. 80% network coverage, way more advanced, by the way, than this is the case here in my almost backwards Germany. The second aspect, where I would say it's a little bit around the bad aspect, is that the usefulness of 5G is still not totally clear. I mean, there are kind of expert assessments out there that it's going to be a 11 trillion value add in terms of economic value add by 2025.
What's the where's that money going to come from? What's the?
I think the bad is partly to what Ibrahim referred to is coming from kind of new city concepts, from e-mobility, auto, but also refers back to the point that we had previously on extremely low latency. And I think gaming could be one kind of key growth area in this 11 trillion scenario by 2025. But the usefulness and finally the consumer, it sits with the consumer like in every other technology. Like this was the case with 3G, which when I worked on this like 20 years back, it was the same with 4G, and it's going to be the same with 5G. So, I mean, it's all around a seamless, strong consumer experience, and nothing else really matters to drive this and bring this to market. And then there's, let me just to finish this thought quickly, there's, I think, also unfortunately an ugly aspect around the entire 5G, I guess, that we're all aware of, around geopolitics, IP, security concerns. So this needs to be overcome to really make 5G a tremendous success overall. Sharing again kind of widely the aspect also that Joe mentioned, I think the esports, in particular within the gaming space, has a particular, is particularly relevant. I mean, we have basically 500 million people are already following these core sport gamers. That's fantastic. And also the way I think many kind of traditional brand, when we talk around FMCG or the Adidas, Puma CEOs of this world, wish they had this kind of connect that these gaming professionals have. And that's, I think, where we all as kind of, we clearly as an agency supporting our clients in the space, and also our need to help our clients to transform and really adapt their marketing strategy, their tactics, and be even closer to the consumer, to segments, to the way they steer channels. And that's, I think that's kind of the obvious task that's at hand, and also the big challenge that needs to be managed. And there is no kind of overarching recipe. This is really it has to be understood kind of, I would say, region or market by market, segment by segment, and also product category by product category. So I think, to exactly the point from Ibrahim, it is a far more fragmented space in media and clearly also in gaming. That's kind of my take.
It's interesting you brought in the subject there of the sort of people following gamers and the popularity of gamers. Yeah. I wonder whether, I mean, I'll go to Ibrahim, but maybe you could sort of throw that into the mix there. That there's, I think we sort of talked about the endemic versus non-endemic brands, but also there's the sort of endemic versus non-endemic ways to reach gamers. Do you reach them through the games? Do you reach them through, or do you reach them through fellow gamers, or do you know, what's your sort of, what can you speak to that sort of experience from your side?
Sure, yeah, most definitely. So I think, and I disagree a little bit with Joe, where I feel like the opportunity or the gaming industry from a media perspective, particularly when it comes to the non-endemic that he referenced, there's still a huge opportunity that exists there that I don't think has been fully realized. So when we talk about evolution of any media, whether it's the first TV ad, which was just basically a still image with some audio over where they copied from radio, or even where we think of the first online video ad, which was just a TV spot that was thrown online, but we've seen that evolve over time. So is there still an opportunity in the gaming space? Most definitely. I think the space itself is evolving, and with that, there's going to be new opportunities of how to engage with consumers. So is there advertising and media engagement happening around gaming? Sure. We've seen this across things like YouTube. We've seen it on search. We've seen it on the consoles itself. But I think the opportunity lies in this evolution of media. So you mentioned very much some of the e-gamers, right? And these people are celebrities, especially in the, just like you would think of any footballer or any basketball player in the same light that as a celebrity, as an athlete. It's the same exact situation where we have in the esports community. And I think that's probably the mental shift that we need to see from an advertising or from a media perspective. But I think beyond that, and just more broadly of how to engage consumers, the gaming industry or the gaming landscape is slightly different. So if you go, for example, on online video, YouTube as an example, you see a huge amount of popularity around people watching other people play games, right? And engaging on that level. So these aren't people that are celebrities in the esports space, but these are people that are online that do commentary, and they're just going and following them. So go to young teens and tweens, or even adults that are engaging with games. They have some of the largest channels on YouTube that are literally people just playing different types of games across consoles.
So the difference that you're saying there is that you, on one hand, you've got the sort of celebrity e-gamer, esports stars who are sort of some of the best in the game that people are following, and on the other side you've got sort of average Joe, well, the average person playing and commenting on it, who might not necessarily be the best gamer, but is being followed for their commentary and their insight. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. So there is definitely some overlap where you do have professional gamers that have their YouTube space or their online video streaming, but in that same respect, they're in many instances going there for the entertainment or for the engagement or for the community around the game. And I think that's the element that hasn't been fully realized when we think of the game, not just, or we think of gaming not just within the game itself, but the community or the opportunity that arises around the game. So whether that's the online engagement with people playing the game, the commentary around it, the social engagement through the game, or even the industry that it's building and the new technology that will enable different types of engagements, either through gaming or beyond. And I think that's where we're still at the nascent point where it comes to media engagement in the gaming space.
Well, I mean, Joe, you run an agency that that specializes in this, and you also run an esports game. We've got however many marketing managers and people on here. What advice would you give them to sort of get involved with this sort of thing? How do you start putting a strategy together around it?
I think what Ibrahim said makes sense as a starting point to that. I mean, you need to understand, obviously, where the consumption is happening. The consumption can happen even from the playing aspect up to the watching, up to the engagement with the people who are actually playing, up to the up to a point of getting influenced by a club or a team that has a fan base. So I think first and foremost, brands and marketeers need to understand what do they want to achieve out of that. Are they trying to kind of add a little bit more of a brand love to their brand health indicator, and to say that, okay, you know what, I want to be a little bit closer to the kind of youth and to the young audience? Are they looking more to kind of access a new community to sell a product that is really used by that community in specific, be it an energy bar or be it a new mouse, for example? So understanding exactly what they need to do and how they want to reach that obviously is something that we can help them with. But fundamentally, it needs to understand the mix of how this topic is being consumed and what is the business objective that they would like to achieve, and obviously be open about creating new things that probably they are not accustomed to. One of the many times we go into these kind of discussions and say, okay, you know what, I want to go into the gaming space. However, I don't want to have anything violent. I don't want to have my brand next to a shooting game. Okay, well, that kind of narrows it to FIFA and Candy Crush. So what do you want to do there? So you have to have an open mind that, about these kind of things, because it's a matter of time before the acceptance of the topic they are using machine guns in the games or lasers will be past us, and you will be left behind if you keep thinking as such. I think being an open mind about this, understanding the reality that these people and these gamers are just kind of playing it. They're spending their time doing that. So don't create tough guidelines for your brand that really are existing probably within your corporate parameter. Be open. Understand how it's done. See what global brands are doing. Nike, for example, is a leader in that by acknowledging that gamers are athletes, which is really a kind of shift. It's a shift within the industry, and they started doing ads with esports athletes. So when you have that kind of understanding as a marketeer, then a lot of blocks will be removed, getting your objective sorted, and there's a lot of good people that can help.
That is interesting. There's one of the things that, Ibrahim, do you think that there's it's interesting when you're talking about that you're limited to Candy Crush and, I mean, I know, that you're limited to Candy Crush and FIFA.
It's a little bit of a joke.
No, absolutely. But I was wondering, I was going to go to Ibrahim and ask, do you think that COVID has changed the sort of games that people are playing? And I'll come back to Christoph again in a minute for some more numbers and things. But yeah, do you think that there's are the games that we're playing changing?
Indeed, indeed they are. And Joe brought up an amazing point, I think, around marketers being open to experimentation. And I think as consumers are experimenting with new games and how they're playing, we've seen since, and it's interesting, with the intensity of lockdown or even personal restrictions people put on themselves, we've seen this increase in terms of games that have a more social element to it, right? So you have, and I'll probably get the acronym wrong, but Joe, correct me. I think it's MMORPG. So it's massively multiplayer online arena game. I think that's what it stands for. And there's a lot of acronyms in the gaming space, but basically that's what we've seen, a huge uptake in terms of gaming, whether it's on mobile or even other devices, where games that people are playing in a multiplayer environment, games that take longer, games that are more engaging, that are more involved, that require more focus. Those are the types that we've seen really accelerate in terms of consumption and usage, whether that's in Saudi or even globally since lockdown happened. And I think it's from the consumer's perspective, there's still these needs for interaction. There's still these needs for communication with others, and being restricted or not being able to go out or having social distancing. I think they're finding solace or a space within the gaming arena where they can still have these types of interactions, even more broadly in some instances, from the comfort and safety of their own homes.
Now, Christoph, I know that you at GfK are working on sort of some gamer insight, a big gamer insight report for the region. And I'd like to sort of tie this in with what Joe was saying about marketers need to be prepared to sort of experiment and take a leap of faith. Obviously, a leap of faith is going to be helped by having some sort of solid numbers behind it. So I'd be interested to find out what sort of things you are looking at and trying to find out, and what your sort of what you think is going to be interesting that we're going to find out about gamers through this sort of through this big amount of research.
Yeah,
and especially how that's going to help marketers, because that's who we're.
Sure. Happy to give my view on this. Just maybe just some quick remarks on what Joe and Ibrahim said. I think it totally also with them on having an open, but also at the same time a very critical kind of rational view on things. I guess that's what I need to say here from an agency and GfK point of view. I think totally agree also with Ibrahim on the trend. I think that's something we've seen pre-COVID as well to multiplayer scenarios. I think that's just something that seems to be, again, COVID has been kind of an accelerator for this fight also against loneliness and being kind of in this locked in. So that comes back to our previous point on sports, and clearly gaming being developing into, or already has developed into, a social network platform. So I can only kind of underline this point. And also pretty much reflecting what Joe said. So what we can only recommend our clients is to make use of this opportunity and this tremendous growth that we see. It's a growth in the gamer core segment, also in the non-core gamer segment. We see a huge growth in terms of channels and games that have been played. So again, comes back to the point on fragmentation also behind the growth. So you need to really differentiate and have a very targeted approach to your segments. And this can only start with deep and rich insights on market and consumer insights, on touch points, also on the marketing touch points that are relevant, to really most effectively reach your audience, and in a second step to activate them across channels, whether that's online or offline. And that's what we are pulling together, or have already pulled together in our gamer report, and previously on the Consumer Pulse report. And are obviously, as an agency, eager to support our clients in finding the most effective way. There's a lot of waste you can easily do in this scenario. I think Joe brought up some interesting scenarios from other FMCG clients that you clearly want to avoid. And that's why the make or break is really the deep and rich consumer understanding, and that's what we are going to deliver in particular for the MENA region, with the gamer report from GfK.
Well, we're running out of time, but we will have time for some questions. So if any of I've got a few questions already in the Q&A section. So if any other attendees want to tap your questions in, we've got we've got 3 experts here on basically everything. So whether you want whether you want to find out about sort of comparative rates of 5G infrastructure development, or how to avoid grenades in Call of Duty, but first of all, I'm going to ask you guys quickly one sort of question, the same question to each of you, which is, we've looked at a lot of sort of opportunities, a lot of changes and things that are coming, but I'd like to ask you on a sort of semi-personal level, what do you think is what development or developments are you most excited to see in the sort of in the 5G gaming tech space in the next year or so? I think I'll go to you first, Christoph.
I think it's amazing to see the media aspect behind. I was really stunned by the the momentum behind the Twitch platform. I think that's something that's clearly, I mean, this is probably really giving a boost to the entire gaming perspective, also from on the media side and from a marketing perspective. And it's I find, I mean, and that's for me kind of the almost the driver behind it. There's and also a stronger development towards these platforms, and this then comes back to our previous point on seamless experience on gaming platforms as general. And I think that's what I'm really keen to better understand together with our clients, and to support them in navigating in this really vehemently changing environment.
Ibrahim, what are you excited about, and what developments are you excited to see?
Sure. A couple of things I think coming up in this space, particularly around gaming and connectivity. I think broadly, with COVID, as lockdown eases and things start opening back up, I'm interested to see where things settle. So we saw this huge increase in terms of gaming and online consumption. And my assumption or my hypothesis is that much of this is going to stick around because it was habit forming. And I'd love to see how much of that shifts to out of home, because most of this was happening in home. Now, I would be super interested to see how much of that is going to be carried out into kind of the out of home experience, which connectivity is going to enable. I think that's on the consumer and connectivity side. Then on the marketeer side, what I'm super interested to see is how marketeers are going to embrace this, and how their approach to marketing, particularly in the gaming space, is going to be evolving over the next few years as more engaged gaming becomes more mainstream, and as gaming platforms and delivery devices become more accessible and more ubiquitous across people.
Joe, as both a marketer and a gamer, what are you most excited about?
I think, to be quite honest, what really is fascinating right now, what you are trying to see as a trend that is growing a little bit more and more in the world. I was in Paris Games Week last year, and I noticed something that everybody was really kind of paying a lot of attention to, is how the understanding of gaming will mix with your physical world. So in the context, if you want to say it in a very simple manner, it's augmented reality. We're starting to see a lot of publishers like Valve, for example, reinforcing their budgets around augmented reality kits, understanding that right now a keyboard and a mouse and a joystick is not going to give you that immersive experience that you are looking about. We are going to start seeing more and more you being immersive inside the game itself. And I think when you reach something like that, this is probably a fundamental shift into how the world is today. It's not going to be as much as, yeah, you know, my ping is better, my latency is improved, or my experience is a little bit more responsive. I can shoot things faster. I think the moment where you start actually going inside a universe and inside a kind of world throughout the improvement of that technology, this will probably be the next, I would say, technological shift within the gaming industry altogether. For me, that excites me the most, because I've seen a lot of games that are going into that kind of space. And I've seen also a lot of brands going into also creating those kind of branded content experiences as well. So that's probably where I would be most excited about.
Brilliant. Well, look, we've actually got quite a number of questions have soared up recently. So I'll start firing some questions at you, if that's okay. We've got two questions about cloud gaming. One is from Stephen Nicholas, who's asked, could you give your thoughts on cloud gaming in Saudi Arabia and the UAE? And a similar question has come in from David, who's the tech editor at Gulf Business. He said he'd like to hear what the panelists think will be the impact on cloud gaming on the space. So first of all, could somebody explain to the layman here, namely me, what is cloud gaming? Who wants to take this? Ibrahim?
Sure. So I think it's become much more front of mind right now, but cloud gaming has been going on for quite some time. When we think about how much of the game is happening on local devices and how much of the game we're talking about, like rendering, frame rates, processing power, how much of that is happening in the cloud. So in the online gaming space, even if we think back to things like Counter-Strike, a lot of that was happening on a network in the cloud, whether it's a local area network, which probably isn't in the cloud, but then when we're talking about cross-device, I think it's become much more relevant recently with the likes of Stadia and new announcements from Amazon and Microsoft and so forth, where the need to have the latest hardware is becoming no longer as relevant as it was once in the past. If the data centers at Google or at Microsoft can process a lot of the game rendering, much of that can happen in the cloud, and then be fed over a data connection to local devices. So the local device itself, what you would be caring about is the refresh rate, so the quality of the screen, and those are your main two elements, along with processing power and connectivity, that would enable a game on any device. And it goes back to the point I was mentioning earlier, where gaming is becoming much more device agnostic.
Interesting. Could we go to Stephen's point then about what? Will there be any sort of specific things to look at with cloud gaming in the UAE and Saudi Arabia?
Can I add a point on Ibrahim's point? I think the best thing about cloud gaming, the way to kind of put it in a picture, is the same transition that happened from CDs to Spotify's and these kind of things. So it's, you can you move that you have to have a physical CD to listen to a piece of music. Right now, you don't need to actually have a physical device. You don't have to kind of have the hardware to play the game that you want. It's on demand. It's anytime, any game that you feel like, whenever you feel like. So that freedom gives you a lot of choices to be able to play different games at multiple times without really having the borders of a financial burden. We've seen a lot of, like, for example, Microsoft Gamers Pass is $10, and that gives you a huge array of games that you can experience and play. I think that is the power, the fundamental power of cloud gaming when it comes to the consumers and the gamers themselves.
Christoph, this it sounds to me like this speaks to your the point that you were making earlier about people buying more affordable gaming setups. Is cloud computing one of the drivers of that, or is it just that they're getting, or is it just that you can get by a better processor for cheaper?
I think it could be an enabler, but it's exactly to the point that from Joe and Ibrahim, I would say, on a frictionless, seamless experience, and again comes back to the point that 5G is a key enabler for low latency, and I believe that this is kind of, especially the MENA region, is UAE, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, are really kind of can be at the forefront of this 5G development. Again, they've got an excellent network coverage. They already have they've got the, it's a very rich, kind of very developed kind of population. So they've got basically everything in place to from a consumer POV, so that this could be facilitated. And I think the only kind of another aspect I would watch kind of as a Samsung, who roughly has 75% of the 5G market at the moment in these markets, is to be on the watch out for these Chinese brands to come in, like the Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivos, and they could bring, I think, another boost to the region, especially in the more in the younger segment, and make it way more affordable to get this frictionless and seamless experience.
Now predictably, I'm getting a load of questions about numbers. So I might just put you on the spot, Christoph, while we've got you here. Answer the ones that you can. Any others, we can push people in the direction of the report when it comes out. But Yves Michel Gabet has asked about the number of people playing regularly in the MENA or the GCC, along with the gender split and the growth rate, and what are the leading games. Perhaps you or Joe can come to this.
And I can say that kind of key demographics as one element will be key of the gamer report. What we see in COVID is an increase in female demographics, where kind of UAE, particularly in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, was kind of a little bit lagging behind, but really speeding up, I would say. Kind of there's more women power coming into the game here in the most literal way, and this is next to. But I wouldn't only give one advice, if I may, narrow it down to social demographics, which is obviously key, but to really steer your marketing effectively. And coming back to Joe's point on to be open, and I would say again rational. You need to have also the to really understand the usage and attitude behind your consumer to make sure you have an ideal and strong brand fit as a marketeer.
Joe, you might know what are the most popular games?
Well, I mean, the most popular games usually you're going to be a little bit kind of surprised about. So FIFA, first of all, football is one of the most kind of prominent, most popular games in the region, followed by Candy Crush, if you can believe that. So that's definitely a very popular game in the region, because actually there's a lot of majority of women between 30 and 45 who spend a lot of time playing that game. So the numbers really add up on that. PUBG Mobile is quite one of the most prominent ones in the region. Fortnite, and then we go to Call of Duty and as such. So these are the kind of most popular games in the region when it comes to that. And we're talking about Saudi and UAE in specific, but the kind of more or less they give a lot of big indication of how the market is. As a split, you're talking about 60-40, 60% men, 40% women. That's mainly the kind of split that is happening right now in GCC, I would say.
Okay, that's quite a good split. I'm going to. I think that Ibrahim might be having some sound issues, but I'm going to ask him via text. I'm going to ask him, within a generation, are there any attitudinal or behavioral differences between gamers and non-gamers? I think that might be quite a fun sort of sociological one to send to him. Let's see whether you.
Okay, great. Sorry, can you guys hear me? Just a quick thumbs up. Amazing. Okay, so I'm not sure what's happening with the audio at my end, but as long as you guys can hear me, that's great. So the question, if I understand it, within a generation, are there any attitudinal, behavioral differences between gamers and non-gamers? It's a difficult question. I think generationally, yes, we've seen that there are differences between the types of games that people are engaging with and the level of engagement. But that doesn't mean, I think there's this blending between generations. So we've seen, particularly on YouTube, where we have, I think there's a grandmother in her 70s or 80s, and she has an amazing channel on YouTube where she plays games and comments on games. So you'll see this kind of transcending generations in terms of who's a gamer. But I think broadly, the really involved and online multiplayer and super engaged gaming tends to skew a little bit younger. But I think we established very early on that nearly everyone is a gamer in one form of the other. But I think the types of games and the level of engagement is probably where there is this behavioral difference between generations, where we do see younger folks much more engaged and spending more time using the social elements of it, whereas older generations tend to use mobile devices more to pass time or to kill time, and are a little bit less interested in the social element or multiplayer engagement element around gaming. But again, I'll caveat that to say that you'll see across the board where you'll have older people and younger people playing these online super engaged games. And apologies if any of that was mentioned a minute ago by any of the other panelists.
What I'm going to do is I've got another question that I'm going to throw to Ibrahim first, so then you can respond to him, because it's unfair to ask him to respond if he can't hear you. And this question is, what is the best way to convince your brand to get into gaming? And with a caveat for Christoph, other than showing statistics and trends. I mean, surely that's the answer, but let's try that. That comes from someone called Felix. So so I'm going to fire this over to Ibrahim, and then I'll come to you two as well. Let me see, another Ibrahim Q. There we go. what's the best way to convince your brand to get into gaming?
All right, so one more to my end. What is the best way to convince your brand to get into gaming other than showing statistics and trends? Really, really important question. Look, I think from a brand perspective, there's two sides to it. You have a lot of people that are very much focused on traditional media and metrics, right? So we want reach, we want brand impact, we want ROI. I think that's more pertinent right now when it comes to COVID and tightening of a lot of marketing budgets. But I think the role of any good marketeer is to have the courage to experiment. So how I've always looked at it is any marketing activities or marketing budgets, some portion of it should be set aside to experimentation, not just within the gaming space, because I think there's a lot of elements within the gaming space that do exist in environments that traditional marketers are really happy with. So think of like online video, YouTube, Facebook, and so forth. There are elements of the gaming industry there. But I think this experimentation is super important for marketers to stay ahead of the curve. Particularly not just when we're talking about the platforms, but even the delivery method. And I think going hand in hand with that, it's super important to have an idea of numbers. So how many people are playing games, what type of people, what type of profile. And again, not looking at these type of people in verticals. So they're not only gamers, right? So they're parents, their fathers, their mothers, they're students, right? They're professionals, they're across the board. So it's about what touch points can you engage with these people at? And then most importantly, any type of experiment that will be set up for any type of marketing activities has to have really solid measurement attached to it. So how do I know if it was successful or not, right? Did I do the right thing or not? And you'll have a lot of amazing agencies out there. I'm sure Joe and his team, I think Joe and his team could help in this space, as well a lot of other agencies that can help you to say, these are the best practices that we've learned thus far in a really evolving space.
Brilliant. Christoph, you're, so you've walked at, I'm the brand manager, I walked into my CEO's office, I say, we need to go into gaming. I've got my GfK report in my hands, and he goes, convince me. What else can I do?
Well, I think everything that you need to convince your CEO will be in our gamer report per se, of course. So now this is really what we are working on with our clients at the moment in this research project. It's actually quite comprehensive. Is really on understanding the key triggers and influences and also barriers for gamers when purchasing a gaming device or entering into gaming. And that's what you really need to understand. You really want to be clear on the purchase intentions of your consumer and which brands they prefer when they buy a device. So that's that's piece center of our gaming report that's to come out.
This is, I think this is backing up exactly what Ibrahim said, that the numbers will speak for themselves at one end or the other. Would you agree, Joe? And also, by the way, Joe, could you, one question that's a slightly meta question is, we're having to wrap up, by the way, in a minute, but somebody's also asked, when you say that you're a gaming and esports agency, what services do you offer and what case studies can you name? That's a sort of slightly question about your business, but I think it ties into this. So how would you, in that capacity, how do you convince people? We've only got a couple of minutes, by the way, I better warn you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Ibrahim and Christoph mentioned quite a lot about how to do that, but I would just give an example of a piece of business that we've done with a client, and it was during a research for gamers. They wanted to understand the gaming community a little bit more. And one of the questions like, tell us, which sports would you do? And all of them said, we don't actually watch sports. We don't actually play sports. I was like, can you please explain? And they said, yeah, well, our sports is our thing is just to play video games. And that's probably one of the kind of more moments that we kind of came to, that this is a new breed of consumers, and this generation Z in specific, is acting differently of the generation that's before. So if you want to really understand and tap into this generation, you have to do what they are doing. You have to be in where they are, and they are spending time on YouTube Live, on the live platforms. They are spending time playing games and socializing there, and that's probably the kind of thesis I would put. as an agency, what we do is just simply we create commercial opportunities for brands into the gaming space. So we can take that question probably aside, and I can discuss this separately with the
Media Arabia. So yep. Okay, we are going to have to wrap up now, and there's more questions here. There are some things that I'd love to look into. It's so annoying, but time is our enemy. So thank you so much. Thanks again to our partner GfK. As you've heard from Christoph throughout, GfK has been tracking developments in the consumer electronics market in the Middle East and around the world pretty extensively. You can learn more about developments in the gaming industry from a complimentary gaming white paper. By the way, this answers one of the questions. There is a complimentary gaming white paper which we're going to share a link with all the attendees after the webinar. And on top of that, GfK is soon to release 2 deep dive consumer reports. One is the profile of gamers that Christoph has mentioned quite a lot, as well as a comprehensive audit of households in the UAE on their brand preferences and product ownership. So I think, again, this answers one of the questions. The 2 reports are going to be available from the end of this month onwards, and they're already available for sale. They provide useful insights and intelligence for companies seeking to target consumers seeking to target consumers for their products and services. So for more details of that, visit gfk.com. And you can also find out more on all aspects of media, marketing, advertising through Campaign's website, magazine, webinars, newsletters, social, podcasts. I'm sure there's more that we're doing as well. So do carry on the conversation there. So it really only remains for me to thank my panelists. Thank you to Ibrahim Khadiri from Google, who's now back up on audio, I think. Yep, excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you to Joe Zogby from Webedia Middle East. And thank you to Dr. Christoph Preuss from GfK. Thanks again to the teams at Motivate, GfK, Google, everybody who's working behind the scenes. If it was down to me, we still, I'd have Tipex all over the screen right now. So thank you, everybody who's helped out. And thank you very much to you, the audience, for joining us. So stay safe, everybody, and we'll see you at the next one.